My name is Lauren, and I'm 34 years old. For 15 years, I've stood at family reunions like this one, smiling as my relatives laugh, assuming I'm a broke artist scraping by. They don't know I built a tech empire, my name now on Forbes' billionaire list. My private jet waits nearby, a secret they're about to uncover. I'm proud, but my stomach twists, dreading their reaction. Will they see me? Or just my wealth? Have you ever hidden who you are? Like and subscribe to find out what happened. I pulled into the dusty lot of the reunion in a rented gray hatchback, the kind that screams practical, not prosperous. My hands gripped the wheel a little too tight as I scanned the familiar faces milling around the picnic tables in this small Ohio town. The air smelled of grilled hot dogs and late summer grass, but all I could feel was the weight of my secret pressing against my ribs. I'd spent 15 years building a tech empire, yet here I was playing the part of Lauren, the artsy dreamer who never quite made it. Abigail, my older sister, spotted me first. She strode over her crisp white blouse, a sharp contrast to my faded denim jacket. At 38, she carried herself like she owned every room, her dark hair pulled into a sleek bun. "Lauren, you made it," she said, her smile tight like she was checking a box. "Still driving that old thing?" Her eyes flicked to the car, and I caught the faintest smirk. "Just keeping it simple," I said, forcing a laugh. My stomach twisted, but I slung my bag over my shoulder and followed her to the crowd. The reunion was in full swing. Kids chasing each other, aunts gossiping over lemonade. I spotted my cousin Nathan, his loud laugh cutting through the chatter as he waved a beer bottle already halfway through a story about his new sales job. Aunt Clara, with her soft gray curls and perpetual look of concern, was fussing over a table of desserts, her apron tied tight. I hugged Clara, her familiar lavender scent wrapping around me. "You look tired, honey," she said, patting my cheek. "Still painting all night?" Her tone was kind, but it stung like she saw me as a fragile thing, one bad month from falling apart. I nodded, mumbling something about a recent art show, and slipped away to grab a soda. The truth was, I hadn't painted seriously in years. My days were filled with board meetings, coding marathons, and deals that shaped my company into a billion-dollar force. But they didn't know that. To them, I was still the kid who doodled in notebooks, the one who ran off to the city with big dreams and no plan. And I let them believe it, because the alternative, telling them I'd out-earned them all, felt like stepping into a minefield. I found a spot by a folding table, picking at a paper plate of potato salad, when Abigail's voice cut through. "Lauren, come join us," she called, gesturing to a circle of cousins. I hesitated, but her raised eyebrow made it clear this wasn't optional. I sat, and Nathan leaned in, his breath sharp with beer. "So, what's the artist life like these days? Still living in that tiny studio?" His grin was all teeth, like he was waiting for me to confirm his assumptions. "It's fine," I said, my voice smaller than I wanted. "Keeps me busy." Abigail chimed in, her tone light, but laced with something sharper. "You know, you could always come back home. Get a steady job." "Not everyone's cut out for the bohemian thing." Her words landed like a slap, though her smile never wavered. I felt heat creep up my neck, my fingers tightening around the soda can. She didn't know I could buy her real estate firm with pocket change, that my bohemian life was a carefully crafted lie. Before I could respond, Ellie appeared, her curly red hair bouncing as she slid into the seat beside me. My childhood friend, the only one here who knew the truth, had been my rock since we were kids, sneaking cookies from Clara's kitchen. "Give her a break, Abigail," Ellie said, her voice playful but firm. "Lauren's doing just fine." I shot Ellie a look, my pulse spiking. She knew better than to hint at anything. Her green eyes met mine, a spark of defiance in them, like she was daring me to stop pretending. "I'm good," I said, quickly cutting her off. "Really?" Abigail raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced, but she let it drop, turning to Nathan to discuss his latest car purchase. I exhaled, my shoulders loosening, but the moment felt fragile, like a crack spreading across thin ice. Ellie leaned closer, her voice low. You don't have to keep doing this, you know. They'd survive knowing you're a big shot. I shook my head, my jaw tight. It's not that simple. The words came out sharper than I meant, and Ellie's face fell just for a second. I wanted to explain, to tell her how much I feared their envy, their judgment, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I stood muttering about needing air and walked toward the edge of the lot, the hum of the reunion fading behind me. My secret felt heavier than ever, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could carry it. I stood at the edge of the lot, the gravel crunching under my sneakers, the distant laughter from the reunion fading into a dull hum. The sky was bruising purple, and fireflies blinked in the grass, but my chest felt tight, like I couldn't get enough air. Ellie's words echoed in my head, urging me to stop hiding, but the thought of facing Abigail's judgment or Nathan's envy made my skin crawl. I wanted to be anywhere but here, playing this role I'd worn for too long. I wandered toward the bonfire, its orange glow drawing me in despite myself. Cousins and aunts sat in lawn chairs, their faces softened by the flickering light. Nathan was holding court, his voice booming as he described his new convertible, how it turned heads in town. You gotta live a little, right? He said, grinning at the nods of approval. Then his eyes landed on me and his grin sharpened. Lauren, when you gonna upgrade from that rust bucket you drove in? Or you still too busy chasing dreams? The group chuckled, and I forced a smile, my fingers curling into my palms. Maybe someday, I mumbled, hating how small my voice sounded. The truth burned in my throat. I could buy his car, his house, his entire life without blinking. But I swallowed it like always, and took a sip of my soda, the fizz sharp against my tongue. Aunt Clara shuffled over her cardigan, slipping off one shoulder. She sat beside me, her eyes soft with that familiar pity. Don't mind Nathan, she said quietly. He's just proud. But honey, you ever think about coming home, getting something stable? Painting's nice, but it's no way to live forever. Her hand rested on mine, warm and heavy, and I felt a lump rise in my throat. She meant well, but her words cut deeper than Nathan's jab, like she saw me as a lost cause. I'm okay, Aunt Clara, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I like my life. The lie tasted bitter, but it was easier than explaining a truth she'd never believe. Clara sighed, patting my hand, and turned back to the fire, her silence louder than words. I stared into the flames, my mind slipping back to when I was 22, packing a duffel bag and leaving this town for the city. Abigail had stood in our parents' driveway, arms crossed, her voice cold. You're throwing your life away, she'd said, her eyes narrowing as I tossed my sketchbooks into the car. Don't come crying to me when you're broke. I'd driven away her words, ringing in my ears, determined to prove her wrong. And I had, but not in a way I could share. Ellie's laugh pulled me back to the present. She was across the fire, chatting with a cousin, but her eyes flicked to me sharp and knowing. She'd been there when I coded my first app in a cramped apartment, when my company went from a dream to a giant. She knew why I hid it, but her patience was wearing thin. I saw it in the way her jaw tightened when Nathan spoke, the way she'd nearly spilled my secret earlier. Before I could signal her to stay quiet, Nathan's voice cut through again. Hey, Lauren, you ever think about asking Abigail for a job? She's killing it in real estate. Could probably hook you up with something. His tone was light, but his eyes gleamed with something meaner, like he enjoyed watching me squirm. The group turned to me, waiting, and my pulse hammered in my ears. I opened my mouth, searching for a deflection, when Ellie spoke up, her voice loud enough to carry. Lauren doesn't need a handout, Nathan. Her words hung in the air, sharp and dangerous, and my heart stopped. The firelight caught her face, her expression fierce, like she was done watching me shrink. "Ellie," I said, my voice low, a warning. She met my gaze, unyielding, and for a moment, I thought she'd say it all: the company, the billions, the jet. But she pressed her lips together, holding back, though her eyes screamed at me to stop hiding. The group shifted awkwardly, sensing the tension, and Nathan laughed it off, moving on to another story. I stood my chair, scraping the dirt, and walked toward the darkness beyond the fire's reach. My hands shook as I shoved them into my pockets, the weight of Ellie's near betrayal mixing with Nathan's words and Clara's pity. I'd spent years building walls to keep my family out, but they were crumbling, and I wasn't ready for what lay on the other side. As I glanced back at the bonfire, a stranger's voice caught my ear, low and curious, asking someone nearby if I was that Lauren from the tech world. My breath caught, and I froze, the crack in my facade widening. The stranger's words lingered in my ears as I stood frozen, the bonfire's glow barely reaching me. My heart thudded each beat, a warning that my carefully built world was teetering. I forced my legs to move, weaving through the reunion's second day, where picnic tables sagged under platters of macaroni salad and watermelon wedges. Kids darted around, their squeals sharp against the hum of adult chatter. I needed to blend in, to bury that stranger's whisper before it grew into something I couldn't control. I grabbed a plastic cup of iced tea, the cold biting my palm, and found a spot near the edge of the crowd. Abigail was in her element, organizing a game of cornhole with military precision, her laughter bright but calculated. Nathan lounged nearby, tossing a football with cousins, his boasts about his latest sales numbers carrying over the breeze. I kept my head down, hoping to avoid their radar, but the weight of last night's near miss with Ellie pressed against me. Then Abigail's voice rang out, sharp and purposeful. "Everyone gather up. Time for the success spotlight." My stomach dropped. She'd done this before at reunions, a tradition where family members bragged about their wins, from promotions to new houses. I'd always dodged it, mumbling vague answers, but today her eyes locked onto me as she waved me over. "Lauren, you're joining this time," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. I shuffled forward, my sneakers dragging in the grass as relatives formed a loose circle. Nathan went first, puffing out his chest as he described closing a big deal, his voice dripping with pride. "Bought myself a boat last month," he said, grinning as cousins clapped. Clara beamed at Abigail, who took her turn detailing her real estate firm's record year. "We're expanding to Columbus," she said, her chin high, soaking in the applause. Each story felt like a brick added to the wall between us, their successes loud and public, mine hidden in silence. When my turn came, the circle turned to me, their faces a mix of curiosity and expectation. My throat tightened and I clutched my cup, the ice rattling. "I sold a couple of paintings recently," I said, my voice barely carrying. "Small gallery show. It was nice." The words felt flimsy, a thin shield against their scrutiny. Abigail's lips curved, but her eyes were cold. "That's it. Come on, Lauren. You're, 34? You're still dabbling in paint." "You could have been so much more." Her words sliced through me, sharp and deliberate, and a murmur rippled through the crowd. My face burned, and I wanted to scream that I'd built a company worth billions, that my dabbling was a lie. But my tongue felt heavy, glued to the roof of my mouth. Uncle Harold, his flannel shirt rolled up to his elbows, cleared his throat. "Now, Abigail Lauren's doing her thing. Not everyone needs a corner office." His voice was kind, but then he added, "Still, honey, you could think about something steadier. For your future." His pity stung worse than Abigail's jab, like he saw me as a fragile dreamer, too delicate for the real world. I nodded, my jaw tight, and mumbled something about grabbing more tea. Ellie was nearby, her arms crossed, her eyes blazing as she watched Abigail. I caught her gaze, pleading silently for her to stay quiet, but her expression told me she was close to snapping. My chest ached the pressure of their words, and my silence building like a storm. I turned away, heading for the dessert table, but Abigail's voice followed me, cool and cutting. "You can't keep running from reality, Lauren." My hands shook as I picked up a brownie, the chocolate crumbling under my fingers. Her words dragged me back to high school when I'd shown her a sketch I was proud of. She'd glanced at it, then said, "It's cute, but art won't pay the bills." That moment had buried itself deep, a seed of doubt I'd spent years trying to uproot. Now standing here, surrounded by their assumptions, that doubt bloomed again, choking me. I wanted to run, to climb into my jet and leave this town behind. But my feet stayed rooted, trapped by the family I both loved and feared. I stood by the dessert table, the brownie crumbling in my hand. Abigail's words still ringing in my ears. The reunion's chatter felt distant, like I was underwater, every sound muffled by the weight of my silence. I wanted to disappear, to slip into the crowd, and pretend I hadn't heard her, but my feet wouldn't move. My eyes darted to Ellie, who was still watching me, her jaw tight, like she was waiting for me to finally snap. I shook my head slightly, begging her to let it go. I turned toward the kitchen tent, needing an escape, my sneakers scuffing the dry grass. The air inside was thick with the smell of dish soap and leftover barbecue. A few aunts were scrubbing plates, their gossip a low hum, but it stopped when I stepped in. I grabbed a sponge, hoping to blend into the task, but my hands trembled, the soap slipping through my fingers. I was rinsing a platter when I heard Abigail's voice outside, sharp and unmistakable. "She's always been like this, Nathan, never serious. I mean, look at her still pretending she's some free spirit." Her tone was casual, like she was stating a fact, but each word carved into me. Nathan laughed low and mean. "Yeah, probably maxing out credit cards for those paintbrushes. Bet she's one bad month from asking me for cash." My grip tightened on the platter, the ceramic cool against my palms. I wanted to storm out to tell them I could buy their lives 100 times over, that my company had reshaped an industry while they were busy judging me. But my throat closed up, and all I could do was stand there, the sponge dripping onto the counter. The aunts glanced at me, their eyes soft with pity, and that hurt worse, like they agreed with every word. I set the platter down, my movements slow, deliberate, trying to keep the storm inside me from spilling out. My mind flashed to the early days of my startup, working 18-hour days in a basement office fueled by coffee and stubbornness. I'd kept it secret even then, telling my family I was freelancing to avoid their skepticism. Abigail had called me once, asking why I wasn't at a real job, her voice dripping with disappointment. I'd lied, said I was fine, and hung up my hands, shaking. Now that same shame coiled in my chest, heavier than ever. I stepped out of the tent, hoping fresh air would steady me, but I nearly collided with Ellie. Her face was flushed, her fists clenched. "I heard them," she said, her voice low, trembling. "How can you just stand there and take it? They're tearing you apart, Lauren." "Stop!" I hissed, my voice sharper than I meant. "You don't get it. If I tell them, it'll ruin everything." My words came out raw, exposing the fear I'd buried for years that my success would fracture us, turn their love, flawed as it was, into resentment. Ellie's eyes widened, hurt flashing across her face, but I couldn't stop. "Just leave it alone. Okay, I can handle it." She stepped back, her lips parting like she wanted to argue, but she just shook her head and walked away, her shoulders stiff. I felt a pang of guilt, like I'd pushed away the one person who saw me, but I couldn't chase her. Not now. My eyes burned, and I blinked hard, refusing to let tears fall. I moved toward the edge of the reunion, where the picnic tables gave way to a quiet stretch of trees. My fingers brushed the cheap silver bracelet on my wrist, a gift from Abigail when we were teens, back when we'd braid each other's hair and share secrets. It was tarnished now, But I'd never taken it off, clinging to the memory of a sister who didn't judge me. That girl was gone, replaced by someone who saw me as a failure, and the bracelet felt like a lie. I leaned against a tree, the bark rough against my back, trying to steady my breathing. The reunion's noise felt far away, but Abigail's and Nathan's words looped in my head, each one a fresh cut. I'd spent 15 years proving I was more than their assumptions, but standing here, I felt like that 22-year-old again, small and doubted. Then I heard footsteps and a man's voice, hesitant but clear. "Excuse me, are you Lauren from the tech conference in Chicago?" My heart stopped. It was the stranger from last night, his phone in hand, a Forbes article glowing on the screen. The stranger's words hit me like a punch, his phone screen glowing with my name in bold on Forbes' billionaire list. My mouth went dry, and I stood rooted under the trees, the reunion's final evening unfolding in a haze of string lights and clinking glasses. The man, Marcus, a local reporter with a notepad tucked in his pocket, tilted his head, his voice eager. "You're her, right? The tech mogul? I saw you speak in Chicago last year." I forced a laugh, my voice thin. "You've got the wrong person. I'm just an artist." My heart slammed against my ribs, and I glanced around, praying no one had overheard. But Marcus stepped closer, his eyes narrowing with curiosity. "No, I'm sure it's you. Your company's worth, what, 10 billion now?" His voice carried louder than I could handle, and I felt the air shift as nearby cousins turned their conversations trailing off. I mumbled something about needing to check on the dessert table and tried to slip away, but Marcus followed, his enthusiasm unstoppable. "Wait, just one question. How'd you keep it quiet all this time?" His words sliced through the hum of the reunion, and I saw Abigail's head snap up from across the lawn, her wineglass frozen mid-sip. Nathan, standing nearby, frowned, his phone already in hand, thumbs moving fast. My stomach churned as I quickened my pace, weaving through clusters of relatives, their faces blurring. The tent where dinner was set up loomed ahead, its white canvas walls glowing under the dusk sky. I ducked inside, hoping to lose Marcus, but the space was packed, tables draped in checkered cloths, the smell of roasted chicken and cornbread thick in the air. I grabbed a water bottle from a cooler, my hands shaking so hard I nearly dropped it. But then Marcus's voice boomed again, right behind me. "Lauren, your story's incredible, from small-town artist to billionaire. How's your family handling it?" The tent went quiet, forks pausing, eyes swiveling to me. Abigail stood at the head table, her face a mask of confusion, but her gaze burned into me, sharp and searching. Nathan held up his phone, his jaw slack. "Holy crap. Abigail, look at this," he said, his voice loud enough to echo. "Forbes, she's on it. Billions." He read aloud, his tone shifting from shock to something colder. Lauren Mitchell, founder of Horizon Tech, net worth estimated at $12 billion. The words hung in the air, heavy and unreal, and I felt every pair of eyes in the tent lock onto me. Clara, sitting nearby, dropped her napkin, her face crumpling like I'd betrayed her. "Lauren, is this true?" she whispered, her voice trembling. My throat closed up, and I stood there, water bottle clutched to my chest, unable to speak. Abigail took a step forward, her heels clicking on the wooden floor. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice low but razor sharp. "You've been lying to us all this time?" Her words weren't loud, but they cut deeper than a shout, each one laced with hurt and disbelief. I opened my mouth, desperate to explain, but nothing came out. My mind raced, scrambling for a way to soften this, to keep the fragile threads of our family intact. I saw Ellie near the tent's entrance, her face tight with worry, but she didn't move, like she knew this moment was mine to face. Nathan kept scrolling, his voice rising. "Says here she's got a private jet, Abigail, parked right at the airstrip. You believe this?" The crowd murmured, some cousins whispering in awe, others shaking their heads. I felt exposed, like my skin had been peeled back, every choice I'd made laid bare. Abigail's eyes didn't leave mine, and I saw something flicker in them, not just anger, but a raw, aching betrayal. "Why didn't you tell us?" she asked, her voice breaking, and for the first time, I saw the sister who'd once braided my hair, not the one who judged me. My chest ached, a mix of relief that the truth was out and terror at what it would cost. I wanted to tell her I'd hidden it to protect us, to keep their love, however flawed, from turning to envy. But the words wouldn't come, and the tent felt like it was closing in the air, too thick to breathe. Marcus, oblivious to the storm he'd unleashed, scribbled in his notepad, his pen scratching loud in the silence. Marcus's pen kept scratching, a relentless sound that drilled into my skull as the tense silence grew heavier. Abigail's question, "Why didn't you tell us?" hung unanswered, her eyes searching mine for a sister she thought she knew. My legs felt like lead, but I couldn't move, trapped in the center of this storm I'd spent 15 years avoiding. The water bottle in my hands was slick with sweat, and I set it down, my fingers trembling, as every face in the room waited for me to speak. Nathan broke the quiet, his voice sharp with a bitter edge. "So what, you've been laughing at us this whole time, playing poor while you're flying around in your fancy jet?" His words sparked murmurs, some cousins nodding their awe curdling into resentment. I shook my head. My voice stuck, but he pressed on louder now. "You let us think you were struggling, Lauren." "That's cold." Clara's chair scraped as she stood, her hands twisting her apron. "I sent you grocery money last year," she said, her voice cracking. "You took it. Was that a game to you?" Her hurt sliced deeper than Nathan's anger, her soft eyes now hard with betrayal. I wanted to tell her I'd donated every cent to a local shelter, that I'd kept her money to spare her pride, but my lips wouldn't move. Abigail stepped closer, her heels slow and deliberate, her face a mix of pain and fury. "You sat in my house, ate my food, listened to me worry about you," she said, her voice low, each word a dagger. "And you were what? A billionaire. Hiding it like we're too small to handle it." Her hands clenched, and I saw tears glisten, but she blinked them back, her jaw tight. "You didn't trust us. Not even me." The crowd shifted, whispers growing into a hum of disbelief. A cousin I barely knew, Jenna, spoke up, her voice loud and accusing. "So all those times you said you couldn't come home for Christmas, was it because you were too busy being rich?" Her words stung, twisting my quiet sacrifices into something selfish. I'd stayed away to avoid questions, to keep this moment from happening, but now it was here, and it was worse than I'd feared. Ellie pushed through the crowd, her face pale, her eyes darting between me and Abigail. "Stop it, all of you," she said, her voice shaking. "You don't know what she's been through." But Abigail rounded on her, her voice like ice. "Stay out of this, Ellie. This is family." The dismissal hit hard, and Ellie flinched, her loyalty to me clashing with Abigail's anger. I wanted to reach for her to say something, but the weight of everyone's stares pinned me in place. Nathan laughed, a harsh, hollow sound. "Family guess, we're not good enough for her fancy life. Bet she's been looking down on us from her penthouse." His words lit a spark in the crowd, and I heard murmurs of agreement, voices I'd known my whole life, now tinged with suspicion. My chest tightened, each breath shallow, as the family I'd loved, flawed as they were, seemed to slip further away. I tried to speak, my voice barely a whisper. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, but it was too quiet, swallowed by the rising tide of their voices. Abigail shook her head, her lips trembling. "You made us fools, Lauren. All of us." She turned away, her shoulders rigid, and the sight of her back shutting me out felt like a door slamming shut. Marcus, still scribbling, looked up, oblivious to the wreckage. "This is gonna make one hell of a story," he muttered. And I wanted to scream, to rip his notepad apart, but I couldn't move. The tent spun, the lights too bright, the air too thick. My secret, My shield had shattered, and I stood in the ruins, surrounded by faces that no longer felt like home. I felt hollow, my heart, a bruised thing, with no words left to fix what had broken. The tent felt like a cage. Abigail's turned back a wall I couldn't climb. Marcus's pen still scratched, and the crowd's whispers buzzed like static, their eyes pinning me where I stood. My chest was hollow, my secret a shattered thing, but something flickered inside me, a spark of defiance I hadn't felt in years. I couldn't let this moment define me, not after 15 years of carrying this alone. I straightened, my voice shaky but clear. If you want the truth, come see it. I turned and walked out of the tent, my sneakers steady on the grass, the night air cool against my flushed skin. I didn't look back, but I heard footsteps, a hesitant shuffle of cousins and aunts following. Abigail's heels clicked somewhere behind, and Nathan's low mutter carried on the breeze. I headed for the airstrip a half-mile away, where my jet waited, its sleek outline hidden in the dark. My heart pounded not with fear now, but with a strange, raw purpose. The path was uneven, lined with wildflowers and gravel, and I focused on each step, grounding myself. I'd spent years hiding to protect them, to keep their love, but that love had cracks I couldn't ignore anymore. If they wanted to judge me, they'd do it knowing who I was. The airstrip came into view, the jet's silver hull, glinting under a single floodlight, a silent testament to everything I'd built. I stopped at the fence, turning to face the group. Abigail stood at the front, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. Nathan lingered beside her, his phone still in hand, his bravado gone. Clara was there, her apron clutched like a lifeline, and Ellie hovered at the edge, her eyes locked on mine, a quiet strength in them. Marcus trailed behind, his notepad out, but I ignored him. This wasn't for him. Get on, I said, nodding toward the jet. My voice was steady now, louder than I expected. A few cousins gasped, and Nathan let out a low whistle, but Abigail's eyes narrowed like she was waiting for the catch. I climbed the steps, the metal cool under my hands, and stepped inside the leather seats and polished wood, a world apart from the reunion's folding chairs. The group followed their steps, hesitant, the cabin filling with their wide-eyed stares. I stood at the front, my hands clasped to keep them from shaking. This is mine, I said, my voice soft but firm. I built it. Not just the jet, but a company that's changed how people learn, how they connect. I didn't tell you because I was afraid. My eyes found Abigail's, and I saw her flinch just slightly. I was afraid you'd hate me for it, that it'd break us. But I'm done hiding. The words felt like shedding a skin, raw but freeing. I walked them through my story, my voice steadying with each sentence. Late nights coding in a rented room, pitching to investors who laughed me off, the first app that went viral. Sacrifices like missing birthdays, holidays, because I was building something bigger than myself. My eyes stung, but I kept going, describing the moment my company hit its first billion, how I'd sat alone in my office, too scared to share it with anyone. Abigail's face softened, her arms loosening, but she didn't speak. Nathan shifted, his usual smirk gone, his eyes flicking to the jet's controls like he was seeing me for the first time. Clara's hands trembled, her apron now a crumpled ball, and I saw a flicker of pride in her eyes, mixed with something like regret. Ellie stood near the door, her nod subtle but fierce, like she'd been waiting for this moment. I took a breath, my chest lighter. The truth no longer a weight, but a bridge. I didn't want to lose you, I said, my voice catching. But I can't keep pretending I'm someone I'm not. The cabin was quiet, the hum of the jet systems the only sound, and I felt a surge of strength, like I was finally claiming the space I'd earned. I looked at Abigail, her eyes glistening, and said, "If you want, I'll fly you home. All of you." My offer hung in the air, bold and unguarded, a step towards something new. The jet's cabin was still my offer to fly them home, hanging between us like a held breath. Abigail sat across from me, her face turned to the window, her silence louder than any argument. Nathan slouched in his seat, his fingers tapping the armrest, while Clara clutched her purse, her eyes distant but soft. The others' cousins and aunts shifted awkwardly, their whispers fading as the door opened to the tarmac. I'd shown them my truth, but now standing on the edge of their response, my chest tightened, unsure what I'd unleashed. We stepped into the cool night, the airport's lights casting long shadows. My phone buzzed relentlessly, family group chats lighting up with messages I didn't dare read. I caught snippets as we walked to the terminal, a cousin asking if I'd pay for her kids' college, another joking about my secret empire. Each ping felt like a pebble against my skin, small but sharp, testing the boundaries I hadn't yet set. I lagged behind, letting the group move ahead, needing space to breathe. Ellie fell into step beside me, her sneakers scuffing the pavement. "You did good up there," she said, her voice low, warm. "They're just processing." Her words steadied me, a reminder of the bridge we'd rebuilt, but I only knotted my throat too tight to answer. The terminal's glass doors slid open and Abigail paused, glancing back at me, her expression unreadable before she walked on. By morning, the buzz had grown. I sat in a diner off the highway, nursing a black coffee, its bitterness grounding me. My phone lay face down, but I couldn't ignore the notifications piling up. A distant uncle had texted asking for a loan to fix his roof. A cousin I hadn't seen in years sent a long message about her startup hinting at investment. Each request chipped at me, not because of the money, but because they saw me as a bank now, not a sister, not Lauren. I drove to meet Abigail at a small cafe in town, its wooden tables scratched and worn, the air thick with the smell of cinnamon rolls. She was already there, stirring sugar into her tea, her posture stiff. I slid into the booth, my hands clasped to keep them still. "I didn't expect this," I said, my voice quiet. "All the messages, the asks." She looked up, her eyes tired but sharp. "What did you expect, Lauren? You drop this on us, and you think we'll just clap and move on?" Her words weren't cruel, but they carried a weight, a mix of hurt and honesty. "I'm trying to understand you, but it's hard when you've been someone else all this time." I swallowed my fingers, tracing the table's grain. "I'm still me," I said. "The company, it's about education, giving kids tools to learn to build. That's why I want the scholarship, to do something real with this." My voice grew firmer, the idea a lifeline I'd clung to since the jet. Abigail's spoon paused, her eyes searching mine. "You always had big dreams," she said, softer now. "I just didn't know they were this big." Her admission was small, but it cracked the wall between us, letting a sliver of light through. I wanted to reach for it, to tell her how much her belief even now meant. But my phone buzzed again, another cousin's name flashing, and I flinched, the moment slipping. Ellie met me later at my hotel, her laptop open to a draft of the scholarship plan. We sat on the stiff couch, papers spread out, her enthusiasm, a quiet fire. "This could change lives," she said, circling a line about funding coding camps. Her faith in me, unbroken despite our earlier fight, felt like a gift, and I leaned into it, sketching out details, my voice steadier than it had been in days. But as we worked, Clara called, her voice bright, almost nervous. "Lauren, I've been thinking about your scholarship," she said. "I want to help. I know a few teachers who could spread the word." Her offer was genuine, eager, but it came with a question unspoken, but heavy. What else could I do for her? I thanked her, promising to follow up, but when I hung up, my hands were cold, the line between generosity and expectation blurring. The truth I'd shared was reshaping us, but not cleanly, and I stood at the edge of it, unsure how to navigate the shifting ground. I left the hotel with Ellie's scholarship draft tucked in my bag, the weight of Clara's call still lingering. The town felt smaller now, its streets too narrow to hold the truth I'd let loose. I drove to my company's satellite office, a low brick building on the edge of town, needing the hum of work to anchor me. My phone stayed silent, a brief reprieve, but I knew the group chats were still churning, each message a thread pulling at the seams of who we'd been. Nathan showed up unannounced, his knock hesitant on the glass door. I let him in, the office's fluorescent lights casting his face in sharp relief. He looked out of place, his usual cocky grin gone, replaced by a nervous twitch of his lips. "Didn't expect this," he said, glancing at the monitors and whiteboards covered in code. "You really built all this?" I nodded, leaning against a desk, my hands in my pockets. "Took years. A lot of nights I didn't sleep." My voice was calm, but my chest tightened, waiting for his angle. He wandered to a window, looking out at the parking lot. "I was a jerk," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Thought you were less. Guess I was wrong." His words were clumsy, but they landed a crack in the wall he'd built between us. I didn't know what to say, so I offered him coffee, the machine's gurgle filling the silence. We sat, cups steaming, and he asked about my work, his questions halting but genuine. How did I start? What drove me? I answered, describing the first app, the one that taught kids to code, how it felt to see it in schools. He listened, his fingers tracing the cup's rim, and for the first time, I saw curiosity, not envy, in his eyes. But later, alone, I opened my email and found a message from Abigail. It was long, her words careful, like she'd written and rewritten them. She apologized for her sharpness at the reunion, admitting she'd felt small, outshined by a sister she thought she knew. "I was proud of you," she wrote, but I didn't know how to say it. Her honesty stung, a mirror to my own fears, and I typed a reply inviting her to visit the office, my fingers hesitating before hitting send. The requests kept coming, though a steady drip. A cousin needed car repairs, another wanted seed money for a bakery. I stared at the messages, my coffee cold, and felt the shift. I wasn't their Lauren anymore, but a resource, a name on a list. I replied to each polite but firm, offering the scholarship as my way to help, not cash. My boundaries felt like drawing a line in sand, necessary but fragile, and each no cost me a piece of the family I'd fought to keep. Clara called again, her voice brighter, pitching ideas for the scholarship's outreach. She'd rallied local teachers, her energy infectious, but I heard the undercurrent, a hope I'd fund more than just kids' educations. I agreed to meet, my voice steady, but when I hung up, I sat in the dark office, the monitor's glow, the only light. My reflection stared back, a woman who'd bared her truth, only to find it reshaped by others' needs. I stood, grabbing my jacket, and stepped outside, the night air sharp. The town slept its quiet, a contrast to the noise in my head. I'd opened the door to my life, but now I stood in its draft, the chill of their expectations settling into my bones. I walked to my car, my steps slow, the scholarship event I'd planned looming like a test I wasn't sure I'd pass. My truth had changed us, but not as I'd hoped, and I carried that weight alone. The community center buzzed with quiet energy, its folding tables draped in blue cloth, a banner overhead reading, "Mitchell Family Scholarship." I stood at the front, my hands clasped the microphone cool against my palm. The room was filled with faces, some familiar, some new, teachers and neighbors mingling with my family. I'd spent weeks planning this, pouring myself into something bigger than the chaos of the reunion. Now, as I looked out, a calm settled over me, like the first deep breath after a long climb. I cleared my throat, my voice steady but soft. I started this scholarship because I know what it's like to feel small, to have dreams no one believes in. My eyes scanned the crowd, finding Abigail near the back. Her posture relaxed, a faint smile on her lips. But I had people who loved me even when they didn't understand me. This is for them and for kids who need a chance to shine. The room clapped, the sound warm, not forced, and I felt my shoulders loosen. I spoke about the scholarship's goals, coding camps, art programs, opportunities for kids in towns like ours. Each word felt like laying a brick building something solid from the wreckage of my secret. Clara stood to my left, her notepad filled with names of students she'd already scouted, her pride a quiet glow. Nathan, in a button-down instead of his usual polo, handed out pamphlets, his focus sharp, like he'd found a purpose beyond his boasts. When I stepped down, cousins approached, their questions kind about the program, not my wealth. A teacher thanked me, her eyes bright with ideas, and I listened, nodding, feeling a connection I hadn't expected. The room's energy was different from the reunions, less about me and more about what we could do together. I caught Ellie's eye across the crowd, her thumbs up, subtle but fierce, a reminder of the friend who'd seen me through every storm. Abigail found me by the refreshment table, a plastic cup of punch in her hand. "That was good," she said, her voice low, genuine. "You meant every word." Her smile was small, but it reached her eyes, the first unguarded one I'd seen in years. I nodded, my throat tight. "I did. I want this to matter." She sipped her punch, her gaze distant but warm, like she was piecing together the sister she'd missed. I stepped outside for air, the late afternoon sun painting the parking lot gold. The center's brick walls stood solid behind me, a contrast to the fragility I'd felt weeks ago. I thought of the years I'd spent hiding, how I'd let fear shape me into someone smaller. That Lauren was still there, but quieter now, softened by the act of showing up, of choosing truth over silence. I leaned against the wall, the stone warm under my palms, and closed my eyes, letting the moment sink in. Ellie joined me, her presence steady, unspoken. "You're different," she said, her voice soft, stronger. I opened my eyes, meeting hers, and saw the friend who'd always known my worth. "I'm trying," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Feels good to stop running." She nodded, and we stood there, the hum of the event drifting through the open door, a sound of possibility, of healing begun, but not yet complete. I exhaled, my breath slow, the world sharp and clear around me, like I'd finally found my place in it. The sun dipped lower, its light softening the parking lot's edges, and I stayed by the community center's wall, Ellie beside me. The event's hum faded as people trickled out, their voices carrying laughter and plans. I felt different, not fixed or whole, but steady like a tree that had weathered a storm and found its roots still held. I'd spent so long hiding, afraid of losing them, but standing here, I realized I'd been afraid of losing myself most of all. Abigail stepped out, her purse slung over her shoulder, and paused when she saw me. She walked over, her steps slow, and stopped a few feet away, her eyes tracing the horizon. "You're good at this," she said, her voice quiet, almost shy. "Bringing people together." Her words weren't grand, but they carried weight, a bridge built from the rubble of our past. I smiled, small but real. "Learned from you." She laughed, a soft sound, and for a moment, we were kids again, sprawled on our parents' porch, dreaming under the stars. She reached into her purse and pulled out a photo, creased and faded, of us at a county fair, our faces sticky with cotton candy. "Found this last week," she said, handing it to me. My fingers brushed the worn edges, and I saw us unguarded before judgment crept in. "Keep it," she said, and I nodded, slipping it into my pocket, a piece of us I'd thought was gone. We walked to her car, the gravel crunching under our feet. She asked about my company, not the money, but the work her questions thoughtful, like she was meeting me for the first time. I told her about mentoring young coders, how their ideas reminded me of my own at 22. Her eyes lit up, and she shared her own plans, a community project she'd shelved for years. The conversation was easy, not perfect, but ours, and it felt like enough. Clara's voice called from the center, her excitement bubbling as she waved a list of applicants. Her work on the scholarship had given her a spark I hadn't seen before, like she'd found a purpose beyond worrying about me. I waved back, promising to meet her tomorrow, and felt a quiet pride, not for the money, but for the space we'd carved together. I drove to my hotel alone, the photo in my pocket, a gentle weight. In my room, I pulled out a sketch pad untouched for months and started drawing simple lines at first, then bolder ones, a scene of the center under tonight's sky. My hand moved without fear, the strokes free, like I was reclaiming a piece of the girl who'd left this town with nothing but dreams. The pencil slowed, and I sat back, the sketch half finished, its edges soft like the evening. I thought of the years I'd spent guarding my truth, how each lie had cost me a little more of myself. But tonight, I'd spoken, and they'd listened, not all, but enough. I wasn't the same Lauren who'd stood at that reunion trembling under their stares. I was more not because of wealth, but because I'd chosen to be seen. I walked to the window, the town's lights blinking in the distance, and stood there, my breath even, my heart quiet. The world felt wide, not heavy, and I let myself rest in it, knowing tomorrow would bring new steps, new questions. But for now, this was mine. I closed my eyes, the night wrapping around me, and felt for the first time in years like I was exactly where I belonged. A year later, I stood in my kitchen, the morning light slanting through the windows, warming the hardwood floor. My new home was modest, a small house on the edge of town with a garden I was learning to tend. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air as I chopped vegetables for a stew, the knife steady in my hand. Abigail was coming over her first visit since I'd moved back, and I felt a quiet thrill, like we were starting something new. The past year had been slow, deliberate, like rebuilding a house brick by brick. I'd left the city's glass towers for this place, closer to family, closer to the roots I'd once run from. My company hummed along, but I'd hired a team to handle the daily grind, freeing me to focus on what mattered: the scholarship, my art, and the people I'd pushed away for too long. Abigail arrived, her knock soft, and I opened the door to find her holding a bottle of wine, her smile easy, unguarded. "Nice place," she said, stepping inside, her eyes scanning the walls where my sketches hung, simple pencil drawings of quiet moments, a bird on a branch, a child's shoe by a creek. We sat at the table, the stew simmering, and talked, not about money or secrets, but about small things: her new garden, my latest painting. Her laughter came easier now, and I felt the years of distance shrink, not gone, but softer. Clara called later, her voice bright through the phone, sharing news of the scholarship's first graduates' kids, now heading to college, their futures wide open. She'd taken on a bigger role, her confidence a gift I hadn't expected. "You gave me something to believe in," she said. And I smiled, my heart full, knowing we'd built this together. Nathan, too, had changed his visits to my office, now regular, his questions about coding evolving into a project of his own, a small app he was proud to show me. Ellie dropped by often, her presence a steady warmth. We'd sit on my porch, sipping tea, watching the stars, our friendship stronger for the storms we'd weathered. She'd tease me about my gardening fails, the wilted tomatoes I couldn't save, but her pride in me was clear, a mirror to the woman I was becoming. I walked to my garden after Abigail left, the evening air cool, the soil soft under my knees. I pulled weeds, my hands dirty, the work grounding me in a way boardrooms never could. I thought of the reunion, how I'd stood trembling under their stares, my secret a weight I thought I'd carry forever. That moment felt distant now, not because it didn't hurt, but because I'd learned to carry it differently. I'd started painting again, not for galleries, but for me late nights with a canvas jazz playing low. Each stroke was a reclaiming a way to honor the girl who'd dreamed big, and the woman who'd made it real. My life wasn't perfect. Meetings still loomed, and some cousins kept their distance, their requests unanswered, but I'd found a rhythm, a balance between who I was and who I wanted to be. I stood brushing dirt from my hands and looked at the garden, its small sprouts pushing through the earth. The sky was clear, the first stars faint against the dusk, and I felt a quiet strength, not loud or bold, but mine. I'd spent years hiding, but now I was here, living openly, my heart no longer a locked door. I breathed deep, the air sweet with possibility, and turned back to the house, ready for whatever came next. The next morning, I woke early, the house quiet, except for the soft drip of the coffee maker. I sat at my kitchen table, a notebook open, jotting ideas for a new art class I wanted to teach free for local kids. The pen moved easily, each word a small act of faith, a way to weave my past into my present. I thought of the years I'd spent guarding my heart, how I'd let fear paint me as less than I was. That choice had cost me not just with my family, but with myself, stealing moments I could have lived fully. I walked to the living room, where a single canvas leaned against the wall, a half-finished painting of a river at dawn, its colors soft but bold. I'd started it after moving here, each brushstroke a step toward forgiving myself. I'd been so afraid of their judgment, of losing their love, that I'd hidden the best parts of me. But love, I'd learned, isn't perfect. It's messy, flawed, and real. My family's doubts, their envy, came from their own struggles, not my worth. Understanding that didn't erase the hurt, but it let me see them clearer as people, not just the weight of their words. I thought of Abigail, how her small gestures, now a text to check in, a shared laugh, felt like gifts we'd earned. Clara's newfound purpose, Nathan's quiet growth, they were proof that truth, even when it breaks, can rebuild. I'd spent 15 years believing my wealth defined me, but standing in this house with its creaky floors and open doors, I knew better. Wealth wasn't the jet, the company, or the Forbes list. It was the courage to show up, to be seen, to love, despite the risk. I stepped onto the porch, the air crisp, the town waking slowly. A neighbor waved her dog, tugging at its leash, and I waved back, feeling part of something, not a part. I'd learned to forgive not just them, but me, for the years I'd spent in silence. That forgiveness was freedom, a lightness I carried in my bones. I didn't need their approval, only my own, and that was enough to keep going, to keep building, to keep loving. I sat on the steps, the wood cool under my hands, and looked at the sky. It's blue, endless, and calm. The world felt possible, not because I'd won, but because I'd chosen to live without hiding. That choice, small as it seemed, was my truest victory, a quiet strength that would carry me forward, no matter what came next. What's a truth you've held back, afraid of what it might cost? Share it below. Let's hold space for each other's stories. If this moved you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for being here, for listening, for carrying your own light. Here's to healing, to truth, and to all the steps we take together.